it all the time, but I truly mean it. Appreciate you guys for covering our program, our players. They truly enjoy speaking with you guys and spending time with you guys, so it's a good thing for them. One, I'd like to recognize this weekend in Conference USA, we are remembering Russ Anderson for his work that he has done or has done for Conference USA. They have a ceremony or acknowledgement going on across the conference, so we'll be taking part in that and appreciating Russ for all he's done and acknowledging him and his family this weekend. You guys were at the game. As I said after the game, we didn't execute well enough to beat a championship team. And when we watched the film, the exact same thing. There were a lot of positives that we can learn from. I thought our kids fought hard. I thought we played a championship team down to the end. But this is not horseshoes or hand grenades, so you don't get points for being close. Our kids were disappointed. That game meant a lot, not only to our team, but our community, our family. Again, I think we can learn from a lot what we watched yesterday. We picked our heads up, corrected the mistakes, and moving on to Charlotte, another tough opponent. Coach Healy has done a phenomenal job down there with his ball club. They are playing really good football. Their quarterback is scrappy as all can be, makes some really good throws, makes some unorthodox, off-balance throws with timing. His receivers do a really good job of fighting back for the ball or, running past the receiver or DB when needed. They run the ball well, and defensively they do a lot. They do a lot of different looks, a lot of different pressures. It's going to cause us some issues as far as communicating. We'll have to be on top of those things. And obviously they're in position, here in Conference USA to at least contend, for this side. So we're excited. We started yesterday. We got a lot of things to clean up from last game. I told the guys, we've lost 4 games, and it's something that we can learn from all 4 that will help us move forward. And we still have an opportunity this weekend to show our growth. No, we don't like to lose, but to me, if you learn something in losses that can help you win down the road, it'll be good. The last 3 games that we lost, we learned a lot, and which helped us propel into a win streak by correcting those things. I told the guys, in the ECU game, we learned that we got to be able to finish. In the App State game, we learned that penalties, turnovers, and missed tackles, missed assignments can kill you. In the Middle Tennessee State game, I think we all know that the ball is the program, and if you turn it over multiple times, you're going to have issues. And in this game, we learned we got to be able to execute consistently. And when we executed, we moved the ball down the field. We stopped them on defense. And when we didn't, we gave up some big plays on defense. And obviously, being 1 for 12 on third down is definitely not executing consistently. So if we put it all together, moving forward, we got a chance to do some really good things. So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
Coach, you talked about their quarterback, but the running game, what do you like there when you look at their core?
Yeah, I think they have a system, which means they do a really good job of complementing the run game with the RPO and the play action pass. What that causes, it causes a lot of stress on your defense because you got to be able to play the run, obviously. So now your linebackers have got to be in the right gaps and at the right leverage. But off of that, the quarterback does a really good job of getting the ball up and out on the RPOs, and they're running the glances and the slants behind guys. So you got to be able to kind of defend both. So now your DBs have got to kind of have their eyes in multiple spots, which puts a lot of stress. I think their running backs do a really good job of getting downhill. They run physical. They understand the scheme, so they understand that, hey, I got to bend back on inside zone, or I keep it front door, or, hey, this is an RPO, so my tempo's got to be a little bit better. So I think they have a system. They run their system well. They do a really good job with the screens, running back screens. Again, that's getting the running back involved. So it's going to come down to we got to execute consistently. We got to be in our gaps. We got to have our eyes in the right place. Eye discipline is going to be a big one for this week. And we got to tackle well, because that's one thing that they've done is they've got some either the running back has broken some tackles and made some really long runs, or they've RPO'd or threw the ball down the field and broken some tackles and extended some plays. So we're going to have to be able to learn from the four and do all of those things, tackle well, gap accountability, eye discipline in order to have success.
With Reynolds, it just seems like he's a kid that doesn't make many mistakes. Whether it's a read or whether it's execution. What have you all seen on film from him and also their wide receiver Tucker? It seems like those two have a really good chemistry together.
Yeah, I think he really understands the system, so he understands when defenses are in a certain coverage or a certain look where the ball is supposed to go. He trusts his ability. He's not out there guessing, or he's not out there trying to make throws that are not there. And I think his receivers do a really good job of trusting that, hey, if I'm in the right area, he's going to deliver the ball. And you see it time and time again. It's kind of almost a really timing operation. Balls up, balls out, receivers there, catch, run. So I think he does a really good job of trusting the system. Obviously, you could tell that he's a smart player. He knows where the ball's supposed to go. He doesn't make many mistakes. He doesn't guess a lot. He's smart enough to know if it's not there to pull it down and run. He can create a little bit with his feet. He's made some throws, on the run. He gets out of the pocket well. So I think it just shows his comfort level with the system, and then obviously his coaches putting him in a really good position to manage what he knows, sees, and has repped.
The nation are tied for sacks, but this isn't a guy you can just go full bore out on and go after him, right? Because he can hurt you, out of the pocket, like you said. You got to be careful, pick and choose when you go.
Yeah, I think, the one thing when you have a quarterback who can create with their feet, you got to make sure you have rush lane integrity. You can't just, hey, I'm going to get a sack, because you get out of a lane, he's smart enough to step up and take off and run and get down, protect himself. So, from a defensive line perspective, we got to have rush lane integrity, which means you got to understand that I may not get a sack all day, but if I'm in my gap, I'm doing my job just as if I went and got a sack. Because if you do your job, at some point he'll fall to you or he'll get pushed to you, and then you have an opportunity to make that sack. But if you kind of just, like you say, run upfield, hey, I'm going to get a sack, and you're supposed to be in the A gap, he's going to step up and take off and and move the chain. So we got to do a really good job with our rush discipline, our lane integrity, and our gap control. Because the same thing, if you just think, oh, it's an RPO, he's going to pull it and throw it, I'm going to go get a sack, he'll hand it off and the ball will wind back. You see that over and over with them as you watch their film.
Coach, is a similar mindset to FAU as far as in terms of how you contain Reynolds and how you go about trying to defend their offense?
I think they're a little bit different. I think Reynolds probably throws a little bit more, after he takes off running. He's probably got a little bit more of a mindset of I'm still looking to throw. FAU was a little bit more, I'm going to look downfield for the big shot, or I'm going to take off. So a little bit different, but similar responsibilities as far as rush lane integrity. You got to make sure you cage the guy. But I think Reynolds does a little bit more. Once he gets out of the pocket, he still gives you the threat to throw, and not just throw, downfield. He'll throw it in the flat. He'll dump it off. To me, which is a quarterback who understands where his players are, where they should be, and even when I scramble, where I need to get my eyes to be able to still deliver.
We got to talk to Corey Gamage a little bit earlier. He's a guy all season long, it seems like opposing defenses have kind of keyed on him, and maybe that has slowed some of the production. I know he was a little frustrated having not gotten into the end zone until this past week, but he got there. It seems like the confidence is really high for him right now. Just as kind of one of the leaders of that receiving corps, what's he bringing to the table for you guys right now?
Well, I think he's a guy that's played a lot of football around here, so the game doesn't get too big for him. The moment doesn't get too low. If we're not getting him the ball, he's still focused on what he needs to do to have success. And I think, again, he creates some matchup issues, as we know. But he's a part of the system, which when it's all working together, it's very difficult to take one guy out of it, if that makes sense. When we've got the receivers to the field doing their job, and Corey doing his job, the running game doing its job, it's hard to take one away. Well, I think you saw Saturday night when one of those gets negated, it puts a lot of pressure on the other guy, which now allows defense to kind of focus in. And I think what you've seen is last game aside, the other part of the season is although they had focus on Corey and him coming into the season being a guy who was returning with a lot of production, other guys started to step up. One game it was Shadeed, one game it was Jaden Harrison, one game it was Willie Johnson, one game it was Talik Keaton. So that's what Xavier Gaines had some games where he got down the middle. So that's what the offense does when it's all working. And if you remember, in all of those games, the running game was efficient. And I'm not sitting here saying we were running for 350 yards a game, but the running game was efficient, and Ali and Shell was able to create some balance in what we were trying to do. So now when you do start to say, well, we're going to negate, Corey Gamage, okay, well, the field receivers are having success and the running game is having success. When it all works together, it's very difficult to stop. But when you start negating pieces, that's when it puts a lot of stress on guys. And I think Corey's handled it well. You look at his stats, he's got a boatload of catches and no touchdowns. I told him he cursed himself at ECU and he should have had a touchdown and he fumbled on the goal line. I told him that's what happens. Football guys don't like you. But no, I think he's a guy that just has been working. One of the things that makes it a little cloudy is we've been able to run the ball well in the red zone. So now that changes a little bit. There's not many receivers that are going to catch balls in the red zone if we're running it. It's not how it happens. But I think that, again, that's a part of the offense. Now, what we got to do is we got to extend our offense to where now Corey not only can catch the ball in the red zone and score, he can catch the ball in the middle of the field and score, he can catch the ball in the red zone, which now makes us a full, complete offense.
And looking at Charlotte's numbers, it seems like teams have been able to pass the ball pretty consistently on them. So was it sort of good to get Corey in the end zone last week, just as a getting over that mental hurdle?
Yeah, I think it was good for him. I think at this point in the season, you can throw the numbers out. We're all trying to find a way to have success on Saturday. At this point in the season, because again, you got to look at the numbers as what they are, numbers, right? You look at our numbers and you say, well, we don't stop the run well. Well, if you take out 5 long runs in the 8 games we have, it's a totally different picture. Well, 3 of those long runs were with the 2s in, so does that matter? So you really have to look at the film at this point in the season. Now, don't get me wrong. We don't want to say that we don't stop the run, and we don't want to have our numbers say that either. But you also got to, kind of open the book and say, okay, well, what is it? For the most part, we do a really good job of stopping the run. We got to eliminate the 1 or 2 big plays a game that go for 40 or 30 plus. Again, gap control, consistency, right? So I don't really look at the numbers of what UNC Charlotte's defense has done or who's thrown the ball on them, because at this point in the season, you got to evaluate the film, the scheme, and then you got to figure out what do we do well and how can we do it against them. Because the numbers at this point in the season can kind of skew things. If they play, Georgia, then their scoring offense is probably not going to be very high. Well, you got to throw the Georgia game out. So I think you look at the numbers for a reference, but I think you also have to really dive into the film, the scheme. What do you see their guys doing? Personnel. I think a big thing now that people don't, that don't live in football may not realize. There's a lot of guys that are hurt, banged up, limping, didn't play, game 2 or 3, played game 5 or 6. So there's a lot of pieces that go into the puzzle this late in the season. And I think you got to evaluate what you see, what you do well, try to eliminate what you don't do well or issues that you've had in the past, and then go play on Saturday.
Coach, when you look back at the tape from the UAB game and talking to some of the guys, they like to reiterate that was a championship team you guys were going up against. That was a good team, but still not really able to get much going in the run game. I know Grant was getting some pressure on him during the game. Just as far as the O-line goes, how do you clean up that execution? How do you get better there this week?
Yeah, I think it's going back to the basics, going back to communicating. When you look at the film, there was a handful of times that we didn't communicate the right call, so we weren't necessarily coordinated blocking the right people, if that makes sense. There were some times where We communicated the right call, but it wasn't the right situation or the right run. And I think you just got to go back to basics, And one, you got to give UAB credit. I mean, they weren't barrels over there that we were picking up and moving. I think, but for how do we fix it? We got to go back to the basics. We got to go back to making sure that what we see on film, the calls we decide we're going to use, we're able to use them consistently in the game. We got to make sure that the call gets communicated for all 5 guys. We got to make sure that all 5 guys are seeing the same thing, not at the same time, but are seeing the same thing. And then we got to be able to make sure that we correct the issues. Was the guy head up or was he slightly to the right? Okay, well, if he's slightly to the right, that could be a different call. Well, the guy made the call as if he was head up. Well, that puts you on a little bit different angle when you're trying to work off to a backer. So it's just little things like that we just got to kind of go back. Some of that comes up when you play a team with better talent, because you can have the call where he's supposed to be head up, he's slightly to the right. If you're better than him, you're probably going to reach him and get to the backer anyway. Well, if you're not better, you're a little bit late on the backer, you're on the edge, create some issues. So just little things like that when you play championship level teams or better opponents, you got to be a little bit more detailed on. And we may have gotten away with it in some other games. We may have been a lot more clear in our communication in some other games. So we just got to go back and make sure we're all on the same page communication-wise, all on the same page with what we're asking them to do. Are we asking them to be outside zone, inside zone, power, gap, whatever it is, to best give them a chance to be successful each week.
And I apologize if you've been over this. I had some technical difficulties early.
It must have been when Cassidy came in late, probably threw everybody's feet off. Yeah, it happens all the time.
I tried to sneak in.
But anyway, I heard a lot of talk about what Charlotte does on offense. What have you seen out of them defensively? What do they do well on that side?
Yeah, I think they do a really good job. They use multiple looks. You know what I mean? So it's not just they line up in the same coverage in front every time. So again, another scenario where the communication is going to be important, right? Obviously, they may come out in 3 different plays, run 3 different fronts or 3 different looks. So we got to be able, within tempo, to get it communicated, see it, get it communicated, snap it, block it. So I think they do a really good job of mixing up the looks. I think they do a really good job. They've got some length at their DN spots that create some issues. Their backers are very instinctive is the best way to say it. Like they don't fall for the old fake right, go left. They do a really good job of seeing what they're supposed to see. So it's going to create some challenges because it's a little bit different. The teams that we've played here in the past have been a little more consistent with their looks. But this team does a little bit more as far as looks and fronts, blitzes, coverages on the back end. So we're going to have to do a really good job of making sure that our pre-snap identification matches our post-snap communication and execution. Cassidy, you got any questions, or are you just going to come in late and just kind of roll with it, or how you want to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I did have one question, but I didn't know if you already answered it, so I was just going to wait and see. But no, we were talking to some of the other guys just about the mentality when you guys are on the road, how different it is, because you guys can kind of be more locked in, you're all together in the hotel room. Do you agree with that, and how do you kind of fix that mentality for home games then, if there is a difference?
Yeah, well, I think, one, the opponent has a lot to do with it, not necessarily where you play. If we play the Pittsburgh Steelers here in the Zone, it'll probably be different than playing Huntington High School at Huntington High School. But I think it's part of the culture that we're trying to instill, which is that the routine is the routine. I think when you get on the road, you kind of remove some of the distractions that you have at home. At home, you got your girlfriend, you got your apartment. You don't get on a bus and leave a day earlier, although we do go to the hotel on Friday night, but you're still kind of in your environment, if that makes sense. And as we kind of continue to instill this culture of the routine is the routine, so the location doesn't change how we prepare, how we get ready for a game, what we do the night before a game. But I think, in year one, I think that's part of it. Because again, change is great, right? Everybody wants change, so it's time to change. Well, when change happens, what you automatically start to do as a human is look for similarities in what you've known. Does that make sense? So It's different when we go on the road because our routine is completely different from how they've done it on the road before. Even though our routine is different than how they've done it at home, they know the hotel, they know, the meal room, they know, how long it takes to get from the stadium or from the hotel to the stadium. They know when we get here, to our building where the locker room is. So there's a little bit of, although there's a new routine, I fall back into what I've known. So that's a little bit of which helps get their mind prepared. So I think it's part of that. I think it's part culture, as we're instilling it, just getting them to understand the routine, and a little bit of the opponent. I mean, we didn't play well against App on the road, but we played well against NC Central at home.